what did you think of the Hopkins news, Heath? What's going on in your fantasy football DeAndre Hopkins world?
It's been a journey, because I originally thought, ugh, old receiver, changing teams, run heavy Titans, and then I went and looked at what DeAndre Hopkins did last year on Arizona. He averaged more than 20 fantasy points per game in the 4 games he played with Kyler. He averaged like 16 fantasy points per game playing with Colt McCoy. 60% of his targets last year came from Colt McCoy or Trace McSorley, and he averaged 1.99 yards per route run. I've been arguing on Twitter about Calvin Ridley versus DeAndre Hopkins this morning. The reason I bring up the yards per route run, Calvin Ridley's career yards per route run is 1.93. He has one season over 1.77. I'm getting more and more excited about DeAndre Hopkins.
Hey. So where do you have him ranked? Because Jamie has him 21-ish, something like that, 22, somewhere around there. How about you?
19?
Oh, the high guy. Okay, but do you have him ranked ahead of Calvin Ridley?
2 spots ahead of Calvin Ridley.
But behind Christian Kirk, because you're still Kirk over Ridley.
Yes.
Okay. Who should be drafted first, guys? DeAndre Hopkins or Joe Mixon?
Mixon.
Yeah, I actually had not updated Mixon, so I'm going to do that right now. I think he goes up to the running back 10. Yeah, Mixon. Mixon round 2-3, Hopkins round 3-4.
Okay. Mixon. So, yeah, we did about a 17-minute show on Hopkins yesterday. But I didn't ask Jamie about your thoughts on Derrick Henry. So we can get into that. And, you know, you guys can debate Hopkins or whatever you want to say about him. Go for it. Would love to get Heath's perspective. But, Jamie, your thoughts on Derrick Henry? Does this change anything for him?
Not at all. I think overall it helps, you know, just from the standpoint of the team. But my concerns are still the same. You know, if you go by offensive line rankings, Pro Football Focus has the Titans ranked last. If you go by his age, he's 29, and that's a, you know, screaming red flag for anybody at that position. And then you just look at wear and tear. And 2 of the last 3 seasons, he has 380 total touches or more. You know, so I have the same concerns about him. I feel better about the situation that he's playing in, because I think now you're not going to see as many 8-man fronts as you would have. You're still going to dare the Titans to beat you through the air, as opposed to letting Derrick Henry run right through you. So he's still going to see a lot of, you know, loaded fronts. But for me, it's still somebody that I'm probably out on unless he falls to the right spot, which is the middle to the end of round 2. And he typically does not get there in most of the drafts that I'm in.
But he does in ADP, at least, you know, in NFC ADP. That's Derrick Henry is, I mean, I've said it over and over again. Tony Pollard, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs are at the 2-3 turn. So
that's incredible.
Yeah, it is. It's a little confusing.
I think the fantasy implications and like the real life implications, if you tell me that Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry and DeAndre Hopkins are playing 17 games this year, I think they're all 3 going to smash their ADP. And I think the Titans are probably going to win the South. But there's a lot of risk with Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry and DeAndre Hopkins in terms of not missing time.
I don't think they're going to win the South, but I did see your tweet about that. You've been very active on Twitter with not hot takes, but I think you're stirring the pot a little bit. You're stirring the pot,
maybe so,
because you know people are still super high on Jacksonville, and you're just like, but you're right. I mean, Tennessee went into Jacksonville at Week 18 last year and nearly beat them with Josh Dobbs at quarterback. So to win which would have won them the division. So let's not discount Tennessee. They're obviously a lot better now. So Heath, your overall take on, let's say, on Tannehill, on Burks, and you already talked about Hopkins and I guess a little bit of Henry.
I think last week Jamie and I were on, and you asked where does Treylon Burks go if back when the odds spiked in Hopkins' favor, and I said round 10, and I think that was a little too low. I've got him in round 8, right around wide receiver 40. I think that same injury risk for DeAndre Hopkins or age risk for DeAndre Hopkins also provides some upside for Treylon Burks. But I don't think he's likely to be a starting wide receiver if Hopkins plays 17 games.
What about Chigo Okonkwo? Done?
He's still a number 2 tight end, isn't everyone?
Would you rather have Russell Wilson or Ryan Tannehill?
Wilson.
Jamie?
Wilson. Yeah, as we said yesterday, you know, you brought up the fact of the tiers, which I guess we'll get to, you know, where these guys kind of fall in line. And I think Tannehill is in the group behind Wilson. But to Heath's point, though, if you were to guarantee 17 games from Ryan Tannehill, it would not be surprising if he's better, because I think, as we've seen in a couple of times over the last 5 years, Tannehill's been right there with Russell Wilson from a fantasy production standpoint. So if they both hit, Russell Wilson should be better, but I think Tannehill won't be far behind.